Two nations that spent the last century trying to destroy each other just sat down at the same table. And what they're building will directly affect the price of every piece of technology you own. South Korea and Japan, historic enemies, cultural rivals, countries whose grandparents still carry wounds from colonial occupation, are now openly discussing merging their economies into a single $6 trillion bloc. That figure would make them the third largest economic force on Earth, larger than Germany, France, and Italy combined. But the reason this is happening now, and the reason nobody in the English-speaking world is paying attention, reveals something far more urgent about where global power is actually shifting. Let's start with a number, 70%. That's the share of the world's memory chips. The components inside your phone, your laptop, your car, that come from just two countries, South Korea and Japan. Add advanced displays, battery materials, and semiconductor manufacturing equipment, and you're looking at two nations that quietly became the backbone of modern technology without most Western consumers ever noticing. Now imagine those two nations coordinating instead of competing. Imagine Samsung and Sony sharing supply chains. Imagine Toyota and Hyundai negotiating raw materials as one buyer instead of two. That's not a hypothetical anymore. On April 28, 2026, SK Group Chairman Che Tae-won stood before a joint business summit and said the quiet part out loud. The combined economic scale would reach $6 trillion. That lets us negotiate on equal footing with China and the United States. He wasn't speaking as a dreamer. He was speaking as the head of South Korea's second largest conglomerate, with $160 billion in annual revenue. Within days, the South Korean government formalized what it called a joint survival strategy with Japan. Not a trade deal, not a cultural exchange, a survival strategy. The language alone tells you how desperate the math has become. So why now? Why would two countries with this much historical baggage suddenly rush toward integration? The answer is standing in Beijing, and it's also sitting in the White House. South Korea and Japan are caught in the same vice. China dominates their supply of rare earth minerals. Over 90% of global processing flows through Chinese facilities. Meanwhile, American tariffs and export controls are squeezing them from the other side. Alone, each country is too small to push back. A $5 trillion economy can be bullied. A $6 trillion bloc with semiconductor dominance cannot. Consider what these two nations control together. Samsung and SK Hynix produce over 70% of the world's DRAM memory. Japan's Tokyo Electron and Screen Holdings make the equipment those chips are manufactured on. South Korean battery giants supply cathode materials. Japanese chemical firms supply the electrolytes. Right now, these supply chains run in parallel, sometimes redundantly, often competitively. Integration means efficiency, and efficiency in a trade war means survival. For you, this restructuring determines something very concrete. If Korea and Japan align their semiconductor production, sharing capacity during shortages, coordinating export policies, jointly stockpiling critical materials, the wild price swings you've experienced in GPUs, in smartphones, in electric vehicles over the past 3 years start to stabilize. One unified negotiating position against Chinese rare earth restrictions means your electronics don't become hostages to Beijing's foreign policy. But there's a catch that makes this far more fragile than any press release suggests. The Korean public hasn't forgotten. Japan colonized Korea for 35 years. Forced labor, cultural erasure, comfort women. These aren't textbook entries in Seoul, they're family stories. Polling from March 20 to 26 shows only 38% of South Koreans support deeper economic ties with Japan. Among voters over 60, that number drops to 19%. So the architects of this alliance face a paradox. The economic logic is overwhelming. The political risk is existential. One nationalist backlash, one tone-deaf statement from a Japanese official about wartime history, and the whole framework collapses. The leaders pushing this forward know they're building on a foundation that could crack at any moment. Japan has its own calculations. Its working-age population is shrinking by nearly 700,000 people per year. Its semiconductor industry, once globally dominant, now trails behind Taiwan and Korea in advanced manufacturing. Alone, Japan faces irrelevance within 2 decades. Partnered with Korea, it gains access to the most advanced memory fabrication on the planet and a younger, more dynamic workforce. This is where the Trump-Xi summit in Beijing this week becomes critical. If the United States pressures both nations into choosing sides more aggressively, through tighter export controls, expanded tariffs, or forced technology decoupling, the Korea-Japan bloc accelerates. External threat is the one force powerful enough to override 80 years of resentment. Already, a formal proposal from the Korean Chamber of Commerce envisions joint immigration policy reform, shared critical mineral stockpiles, and a unified negotiating position within the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership. A semiconductor alliance modelled on Europe's IMEC Research Institute is being discussed in Seoul and Tokyo simultaneously. The implications extend far beyond Asia. If this bloc solidifies, Europe loses its last leverage in technology negotiations. America gains a powerful ally, but also a partner capable of saying no. And China faces a consolidated front controlling the choke points of the digital economy. The memory, the displays, the batteries, and the manufacturing precision it still cannot replicate domestically. Your retirement fund, if it holds any technology exposure, is pricing in a world where Samsung and SK Hynix compete against each other. A world where Japanese equipment makers sell to anyone with cash. That world may have just ended. What replaces it could be far more stable or far more volatile, depending on whether history or economics wins this race. Within 5 years, this alliance either becomes the third pillar of global economic power, alongside America and China, or it shatters under the weight of unresolved trauma. There is no middle ground. The chips in your pocket, the car in your driveway, and the retirement account on your screen will all register the outcome. 2 nations that couldn't share a flag are now sharing a survival plan. What they decide next determines your prices.